Well, hello guys, welcome back to the channel and welcome back to the build of the Skymaster F-18. Yes, you are very observant. This thing is upside down. I'll tell you what we're focusing on in a second, so hang tight and we'll get back into the build of this aircraft. All right guys, in this episode, we will be focusing on basically two things. Number one thing is an operational tail hook. I'll throw a picture up here of kind of what we're looking at. Number two is going to be tanks and the plumbing inside of the tanks. So that's what we're focusing on this episode. So first thing we're going to do is we're going to get the pipes installed in the back end of the aircraft to see how much room we actually have in the back portion of this aircraft to fit the servo for the operational tail hook. So let's take a look at the back of this and see what we got. All right, so it's going to be a little bit hard to show you guys in here, but basically I think we got enough room for the servo in there. Yeah, can't really show you. Basically the servo is going to sit in front of the former that's there. It's going to sit kind of right in the center of your screen is the plan, so right in that area. All right, so there is a better shot right there with one of the pipes taken out. So basically we are going to put it right in front of that rear former with a vertical, and I think there's plenty of room in there for the servo to get installed. So I'm going to work on how we're going to get that servo in there and make things work. All right, so kind of just thinking out loud here and trying to see what I can come up with. So I've got the servo kind of placed in there. The servo arm is roughly in our center line here. Now, it's a little bit hard to show you on camera, but if we scroll in there or zoom in, you can see the servo arm right there. So if I put the tail hook up there where it's going to go, what I'm kind of thinking about is having a linkage come off that servo, which the arm is kind of sitting about here roughly. So we have a linkage come off that arm through the fuselage, through the tail hook assembly here, and have a slot right back here. We can have a control horn mounted onto the actual tail hook, and that linkage is going to look something like this. So we have to have that linkage at the right position, so when it's extended, the linkage mount on the hook obviously lets it all work. But I think that's going to be our possibility, or the way we're going to do this. Now the first thing we need to do is get rid of the side to side. So that's going to be fairly straightforward. What I'm going to do is I'm going to build this area up on both sides with some high sol and basically fill that whole area. So the linkage or the tail hook side to side is now solid, and we only have one pivot point because we need that to come back up and sit in the little keeper right there. So as long as we're putting our glue in there, leaving this in this position to cure, then our pivot point will be good and it'll always bring it back to that spot. So I guess that's kind of the first step. Have a game plan of what we're doing here. But step number one, I think, is we're going to get this tail hook glued, let it cure overnight, and then we can work on this again tomorrow when it's cured. All right guys, so we've got a couple things that we're doing here for the tail hook. So number one, we've got our servo mount. This is an aluminum servo mount. Nice thing about this is we can just high sol this in place in the appropriate spot. We're going to be using an 8411 JR servo mounted on there. So one secret for this is basically put a piece of tape across here and mount your servo, and then you can just place this tray wherever it needs to go, and that'll keep the glue from going on to your servo. So that's what we're going to glue in the back end of this aircraft. And then we've got our tail hook hinge point now fixed. Now we're going to sand all this down and make it look pretty eventually, but we're just kind of getting this roughed out to begin with. So what we're looking at in the airframe here is I'm just going to put this servo kind of linkage kind of there. So the arm's going to sit up like this, and our linkage is going to come down kind of at that angle like that. So our pivot point, we're eventually going to put it in here. So what we need to do is we need to get this mounted in the aircraft, the tail hook body mounted on the underside of the fuse. Once that's done, then we can open up our channel here, here, and get our linkage all sorted out. So that's going to be the next steps with regards to the tail hook being operational. All right, so we have these items prepped. We have sanded the underside or the actual tail hook pod assembly. We have mounted our servos. So you can see there's a little bit of space there in between the servo and the tape. So we can get high sol in there, and it's going to be a nice solid contact. So that's the servo that's going to mount in the tail hook area. And then we've got the area of the fuselage all sanded down as much as we need to. I just use a Dremel bit. And now we'll just high sol that in place. You can kind of see my pencil marks there. That was just my guide to know where to stay in the lines. So now we're just going to mix up some high sol 9462, the 24-hour cure stuff. Get all that stuff mounted, taped in place, and that'll be another thing for tomorrow that is ready to go. That's one of the things with an aircraft like this. There is a lot of things that you have to wait for. So that's why I've got kind of multiple things on the go. I was thinking about starting the PC-21 build as well too, so we'll see how that goes, but you're kind of just gluing and waiting. What I actually did yesterday while I was waiting for that other stuff to cure was just kind of got things laid out in my mind. So I put the rods in here, kind of played with an idea of making a startup plate mount here, kind of figuring out where we're going to put the power box royal, playing with different smoke tank options, getting my head wrapped around the air tray on the front here, playing with the afterburner lights, playing with all this stuff for the rudders or vertical stabs. So that's what I do while I'm waiting for glue to dry. I've told you guys that in the past. I spend a lot of time thinking on where things are going in aircraft. So while I'm waiting for glue, that's what I do. All right, so everything has been glued. I also cut a piece of this carbon plate out and glued that into the tail hook. So before I leave that for the night to cure, I'm just gonna make sure it's straight up and down. Probably gonna use a clevis on this side and a ball joint on the other side. And our tail hook pod, if that's what it's called, is glued and taped on the fuselage. So that is doing its thing. And then our servo inside there is also stuck in place and curing. All right, so while we're waiting for the glue to dry, now is a great time to deal with the tank. So this is pretty much how I deal with all of my tanks. Of course, in the first video, we glued the bungs in, the vent fittings, all that stuff. So what we're gonna do now is we take some alcohol, some rubbing alcohol, 99% if you can get it, and we put some of that in the tank, swish it around, dump it out, put the rest in the tank, swish it around, dump it out, and then that gets rid of all the dust in the tank, and then we can work on our fittings. All right, so let's talk about tank plumbing for a minute here and discuss some different trains of thought and what this kit comes with. So this is the standard kit that comes with the Skymaster F-18. So there's these small brass tubes, the normal bungs and all that kind of stuff, and then the clunks themselves. So the tank, or the kit only comes with 3 clunks. You actually need 4, so fortunately I've got an extra one, so we have 4 clunks because we have 2 pickups in the main tank, right? Each pickup goes to a UAT. So you've got one pickup going to the UAT or the bubble trap for the one engine, the other pickup going to the other engine. Now, plumbing on this aircraft, we've got our UATs. The line is going to go to the main tank, which is upside down. The tanks get filled, and then it goes to the saddle tanks. So each one of these lines goes to a pickup line on the saddle tank, and then our vent, we're going to tee the vent with high flow fittings into one tube, and that's going to go on the outside of the aircraft. So basically we need one of the bungs in each of the holes, and we need a pickup on each side. Okay, so that's how we're plumbing this tank. Now, regarding the clunk tubing, this is a huge hot topic all the time for years and years and years. Generally, I will use, I'm not super critical on what I use, but I like to use Tygon tubing, genuine Tygon tubing, and it works very well. So the 5/32 in this case is going to be the best option because it fits over the clunk lines perfectly. So we could use the bigger size stuff, the 4040 Tygon, which fits over the bung fittings nicely, but doesn't fit over the clunk fittings great. I mean, we could make that work by tie wiring it 2 times, but not a huge fan of a loose fitting like that. So these are 170 engines. This would be overkill. This is going to be great. Now the kit also comes with this clear tubing. It's just as soft as Tygon, but it's more like Festo or the normal plumbing tubing, but it's more flexible. So what we'll probably do is we're going to use this stuff on either the main tank or the saddle tanks, and then we're going to use Tygon on the opposite one that we don't use it on. So pretty straightforward in this situation. You're just making sure that your line reaches obviously the bottom and the top and doesn't get tied up. But these clunks are nice and heavy, so it should be a 0 issue. So I'll get these clunks done up and I'll show you guys what they look like. All right, and just because I never talked about it, yes, I have used Viton tubing as well. Works just fine, but I'm not in the mindset of saying that's the only thing you can use and your plane's going to fall apart if you don't use it. So anyways, what I do is I just get the clunk line kind of mocked up and nothing tie wired yet, and then we can install it and see how it works. It's actually quite nice with this 2 pickup system because you can actually see in there and see what's going on. So this clunk line's a little bit long. It's actually hitting the back here, this the pointed part of the tank, and it's the clunk line still has some bend to it. So we're going to shorten that up about 1 centimeter or so, and about 1/2 inch, and we will see how it fits after that. All right, so we've got both of the clunk lines done up with the tubing that SkyMaster has included. One little trick here is you can warm it up a little bit to straighten it out and get rid of that curve, and works out good, and now the tubing sits nice and straight. So we're going to put tie wire on each of these ends. In one of my communications with you guys, you were asking which video I showed doing this to fuel fittings or tubing, so figured I would show you guys again. Basically always wrap it twice, and the wire that I use is thin gauge safety wire. It is 0.20 wire. So I always cut way too much. I just use forceps. Yes, there's a tool for this, and just grab it. Spin it around. Don't go too tight, otherwise it'll just snap. And snip it off. Fold it back towards the non-important end. So that's it. So I'm going to do all of these fuel fittings, then we'll put a little bit of silicone lube on this O-ring, and we can get these installed in the main tank. All right, and as a final step tonight, what I've done here is just taken a piece of big fitting, put it between the vents. I've taken a small piece of tubing, put it on the one bung, and just my extra roll here of Tygon tubing. With my mouth only blown into the end of the tubing to pressurize the tank. So there's not a lot of pressure in there, but it's enough. And then closed off the fitting there. So tomorrow, if I open this tank up and air leaks out, we know that there's no leaks in the tank. If there is leaks, then what we do is we do the same thing, submerge the tank underwater and find the leakage point. But this is a nice, easy way to do it. All right, guys, so it has been 24 hours since we were last in the shop, and still feels like the tank has pressure in it. So let's undo this valve. Squeeze the tube a little bit. Ooh, and we had air come out. So no leaks in the tank, which is good. We still have the saddle tanks to do, but the main tank is good to go, good to install. So a couple other things. The adhesive on the tail hook will have cured by now. So that part is done, and we are nice and solidly mounted, and that looks good. So we'll pull the rest of the tape off, and then our carbon horn that we mounted onto here is all cured as well. So that will be awesome. So next step, take the tape off. Oh, one other cool thing. We got our shop IX20 radio today in the mail. So that's a good time, because what I can do now is I can set the F-18 up on this radio for the owner, and then we can start programming things like that tail hook in the radio, which is good. All right, so now with the radio and the power box all programmed and everything, basically I was able to plug in a test servo and get that channel operating properly for the tail hook. Took the tail hook and did some sanding on it here. So sanded down the high sol to make it more smooth and form-fitting compared to what we have. Sanded down the carbon horn here for the actuator arm to mount to. And that brings up another important tip. Wait a second, an important tip. It must be time for tip time, brought to you by Trusty Bent Screwdriver. All right, this episode of Tip Time, guys, pretty basic, pretty simple. When you are sanding carbon, fiberglass, anything like that, carbon specifically, have a vacuum handy. So what I like to do is I will sit down on my stool in front of my garbage can and have the vacuum in between my legs, holding the vacuum nozzle while I hold a part like this in one hand. I'm sanding with the other hand, and the vacuum's right here sucking that carbon dust up. So you want to make sure that you are sucking that dust up into a vacuum with proper filtration. Don't want to be breathing that stuff in. So kind of a lame little tip time, but it's an important one. We are going to end up painting this tail hook. Now, if we don't have a color that's a bang-on match, which we probably don't, we're just going to tape this area off here, and we're going to paint this portion a little bit of a different shade of gray. So that's how we're dealing with that. But before we do this any further, I've attached the tail hook back onto the mount. You can see that the tape pulled a bunch of paint off there, so we need to touch that up as well. And we've got kind of our linkage hole set up here. So this is basically the line that we want our linkage to follow. And that kind of jives with the servo arm that's inside. Kind of hard to show you this stuff just because there's not a lot of room to get the camera in there. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to take a drill bit and basically mock up or drill to the angle that I want that control rod to be at. So I'm going to put the tail hook on one more time, bolt it on, take my drill and just drill through everything, and that'll give us our channel for our actuating rod. All right guys, so bolting the tail hook back on just temporarily so we can get an idea of where this is sitting at. I'm just going to draw a mark here on the side with my pencil so I know kind of what angle I'm wanting to drill this at, and then I will just follow that same angle with my drill bit the best that I can. All right, so this is our servo assembly that we're going to be using for the tail hook. So it's pretty straightforward. We're using a Dubro nylon or plastic servo horn. Reason for that is if we ever have any contact with the tail hook, don't particularly want anything to break. I'd rather the servo horn maybe give way. But we're using a clevis on one end, using a ball joint on the other end. The ball joint's just going to ensure that we take up any movement side to side that needs to be taken up, and that should work out just perfect. So we got the switch layout from the owner. This back switch here is going to be the tail hook switch. So what I've done is I've gone into the radio and reduced the travel on the servo horn right now. So when we connect it, it's only traveling a little bit of the distance, and then we can increase that travel once we get the tail hook hooked up, and it just ensures that we don't wreck anything. Alright, so we also changed the pivot hardware for the tail hook. Previously it was like a 256 bolt and nut, and I upgraded it to a 440 size stainless and using 2 nylon lock nuts on each side. That gives the pivot point just a little bit more beef, ensures there's no side-to-side play, and should work good. Alright guys, so here you can see the initial travel with the travel in the radio turned way down, as I mentioned. So what we're going to do is we're going to go into the radio, into servo adjustments here, servo setup, and adjust the travel on that channel. So right now it's plus and minus 41. And we're just going to go in there and turn it up on each end so we can get the servo or arm moving to its proper amount. And here she is. Beautiful. All right, so a couple things we've accomplished here. Number one, we have painted the surface that got pulled off. Now it's a little bit different gray, but this will never be seen. And while we're here, we painted the clevis and rod and everything. And then we painted the tail hook all one solid gray color. So next thing we're going to do is we're going to mask off the tail hook and paint the lighter colors. And for the lighter colors, we are using Tamiya color AS20, the insignia white. So that will show up nicely on that tail hook. And then we'll be doing that band right there black, and the actual tail hook black, which we'll probably paint by hand. So next step is just mask this off and shoot some white on there. All right guys, so there's the tail hook kind of detailed out. Obviously we haven't done the black yet, but that gets us started. And now what we can do is reinstall this tail hook onto the aircraft. And then once it's installed, we will spray the black, or detail the black on there, because the paint's still a little bit wet, but that gets us installing this back on the aircraft. All right, so putting the tail back on the aircraft, pretty straightforward. But basically we are just getting this all lined up and threaded in. This is a great time in the video to give all of those people that have donated to the shop build a shout out. So thank you to all of you guys that have sent some funds for the lighter side of RC shop build. Really, really appreciate it. If you don't know what we're doing, so we're crowdfunding for the build of the shop at the lighter side of RC. We've had a ton of donations already from you guys. So thank you so much for those donations. It's awesome to see the support, and it's pretty stinking cool to see what a community can do when we come together and work together. So thank you. Appreciate it, guys. All right, guys, and there is our tail hook all attached and operational. So our paint is still tacky, so we got to be careful with that. So we're not going to paint the black parts yet, but we are very, very close to being done with the tail hook. So a couple other little important notes here. I started installing the covers here for the gear access yesterday. You do have to do a little bit of sanding on the covers to make them fit the shape. I just used a couple of the screws that come in the Skymaster kit, put a couple drops of medium CA on the leading edge here just to keep that leading edge tucked down nicely. But if this ever needed to come off, it's really easy to come off and get access to those gear openings. The saddle tanks that we tested, I opened those up yesterday and they held pressure for 24 hours. So all of our tanks are good to go, which is great. And our last step here is going to be detailing this tail hook, and then that'll be done. So when that paint is ready to be done, we'll come back and finish that up. All right, guys, and that's it for this video. So basically the focus of the video was primarily on the operational tail hook, how to get it set up, how I set it up. I mean, there's lots of different ways to do it, but to me, this just kind of made sense. So the painting here is done. I'll touch on that as a last thing. So I just used black on the band there, which is still wet. And on the actual tail hook portion, what I did was I used a base of black, and then I took some gunmetal and dry brushed. So that's where you take some paint on your brush, you wipe most of it off, and then you just go over it. So I dry brushed some gunmetal on there just to give the effect of like wear and metal, and a little bit of weathering on the plane, even though the rest of it's not going to get weathered. So, but I'm really happy with the way that turned out. And I think it looks awesome. So I'm going to do the videos a little bit different in this series with the F-18. I've kind of decided we're going to do accomplishments in the videos. So rather than just being sporadic and random and whatever we accomplished, we're going to do blocks of accomplishments. So in this video, obviously we did some extra things like the tanks and the little vent covers, but the primary focus was the tail hook. Now I think the next video we're going to probably focus primarily on either the elevators or the rudders, vertical stabs, horizontal stabs, maybe both. But that's going to be the next focus of the next video, and that'll be easier for people in the future to go back and find out sections of the build when you're putting an aircraft like this together and using my videos as a reference. So anyways, guys, thank you for watching the F-18 build series. Hopefully you're enjoying it so far. This was kind of fun to do. I've never actually done an operational tail hook on an F-18 before, so thanks, John, for requesting that, because it was fun to figure out. So anyways, guys, if you have any questions, list them down below. If you have any more serious questions, YouTube is not a great method to ask a question, because I don't always get your guys' comments until sometimes weeks, a month later. It's weird how it shows up. So if you do have any actual questions about building services, building aircraft, that kind of stuff, getting me to build an aircraft for you, please reach out via email, thelightersideofrc@gmail.com. Their email address is listed down below, and we can communicate that way because it just makes more sense. So anyways, guys, thank you for watching the videos, and If you haven't done so already, hit that thumbs up button, hit the subscribe button down below. If you're not a subscriber, I don't know why you're not. But I mean, if you don't want to subscribe, that's okay too. So thanks guys for watching, and we'll see you in the next video.